Hello YouTube, I'm Elwirfy and today we're going to be having a little bit of a discussion today. As I clear my throat as I've just woke up and I decided I wanted to talk about a kind of really interesting thing that I noticed with having gained experience from playing against the Primaris Space Marines and kind of talk about some lore, just kind of general thoughts about them, how I think about them outside of the realm of this sense that, oh, they're just better Space Marines. Why not? Why not buy them? Why not make an army out of them? Get rid of all your old stuff. But I feel like that would be kind of it's expensive. I mean, the Primaris Space Marine tank, the one that hovers and such, that's gonna be, well, how much was it? I want to say it's about like $200. It's ridiculous. Something ridiculous. You don't want to be spending money on that. I mean, look, it's really good, right? So I couldn't take it out with the new Predator that I've constructed. I'm sure it'll be, maybe I'll be able to deal with those anti-tank things more and more, which is really good. That's really what you want to be going for sure. Definitely much better, of course, than if I were to just say not make any anti-tank and I went straight for like if I like maybe I'm not explaining that right. If, for example, I went out and I bought Primaris tank, I have to cut out 350 points in my army. I could get 2 Predator tanks both doing the las cannon shots. So in a way, there's no real. I mean, as much as I love the output of the Primaris, because I think it's like a 14, armor, and some ridiculous amount of wounds, like 16 wounds. And it's strong. It doesn't seem worth the money to buy it when you already have stuff that should be able to do the same job, especially since I'm going to be trying to get, the Devastator squad at some point, depending on how things go. Again, pricing, looking at, money and all that. Because, I mean, Warhammer is expensive, right? Let's not beat around the bush here. We know that Warhammer is expensive. It always has been, and it always will be. And that's just something you kind of have to accept unless you buy things on eBay. If you buy things on eBay, well, that's a great way to get your models. But you got to be careful. Sometimes people might try and scam you. I personally don't use eBay because I want to get stuff fresh out of the package. I like that new package smell, I say as I drink my kind of oldish water, but it's fine. It's only been like a couple minutes since I opened it. So with the Primaris Space Marines, I also don't really like them from a lore standpoint. Not necessarily because I think they're like, bad. I don't doubt in any way that these the Primaris Space Marines are in any way, horrible. But I do kind of think that it's a little bit overrated, the idea of like, oh, look, a new Space Marine. I mean, especially with 8th edition, where everyone got their Primarchs back. Like, pretty much everyone got their Primarchs back except for the Blood Angels, and maybe it's the Salamanders, I don't know, and one other Space Marine faction, right? So, knowing that, especially if you look into the lore of the Blood Angels, you'll find that, well, okay, so every chapter has their own traditions of how to do things. But the way the Blood Angels become Blood Angels is that they get part of the blood of Sanguinius put into them, so that way they have, the increased strength, and so that way they're all connected as a chapter. Primaris Space Marines, they're created off in, some other, whole other planet, and they're not even really connected to, the process of selection, how, for Blood Angels, the way it works is you have, all these prisoners who are trapped on like this underground area in Mars, right? And then they end up fighting in arenas and trials. Some of them have to climb mountains, and then after you climb this giant mountain you're not allowed to stop climbing. It's a straight shot. Then you have to have a battle royale kind of with other people, or at least that's one of the ways in which you do it. Sometimes they're just selected, and sure, I mean, you don't have to go through every single trial, but there's also a lot of psychological things. Like, for example, this faction, the Blood Angels are kind of considered like vampires because one thing they do is they put you inside of a sarcophagus and fill it completely with blood, so that way your body's kind of like it's like symbolic of being soaked in the blood of the Primarch and such. And then after that, if you survive, because most of these trials can kill you, and that's kind of part of the point. But if you survive that for whatever reason, you then have to then get indoctrinated like normal, in every Space Marine chapter, and eventually you become, a Space Marine. But the point is, however many traditions there are, and I'm sure I'm forgetting stuff. There's a lot. All right, the Blood Angels alone have a lot of traditions that I'm not going to get into in this particular video. But the point is, Primaris Space Marines haven't done any of that, right? And it's heresy, right? It's horrible. This idea that well, I can just show up and just claim to be a Blood Angel, even though I have no connection at all. Plus, how would now? Granted, I know Red Thirst is gone. That's fine, and that makes sense because Red Thirst helped Initiative, and Initiative doesn't really matter in this game anymore because it's just not important. So in all fairness, sure, you're going to have it be less valuable. But the thing is that it doesn't account for is the fact that when you the point of Red Thirst was that every single Blood Angel, right, is connected to their Primarch, Sanguinius, because they have these horrific flashbacks sometimes of seeing Sanguinius die in battle to Horus, right, during the Horus Heresy, right, which is a very critical part of lore, because that's if you have too many visions or if something, or the visions overwhelm you, then there's a chance that, well, maybe you turn into a Death Company. That's what I like. I think the Death Company is super cool, right? Because, the Death Company are super connected to the life of their Primarch, and I just think that, and the fact that the Blood Angels still make use for these insane people is just wonderful. Right, and the Dreadnoughts, wow, that means in order to be a Death Company Dreadnought, right, you have to survive the Black Rage, fight, be destroyed, past almost the brink of no return, but your brain be intact, and in your torso, then they put you inside a Dreadnought, and, and you can only be controlled by the Primarch. That's amazing, right? So, if it makes sense, it's like the Primaris Space Marines just wouldn't have that even as a possibility. You can't have Red Thirst, you can't have, visions of Sanguinius, you're just not part of the Blood Angels. Unless, maybe I'm missing something in the lore, right? Maybe the lore is confusing me, and for whatever reason, these Primaris Space Marines have become, they have to go through the trials, and that'd be fine. But it sounds like, based on the lore, that Guilliman, who's a Space Marine Primarch, if I'm remembering correctly, when I say Space Marine, like Ultramarine Primarch, it just makes me kind of wonder, like, oh, so did he just kind of toss these guys into this chapter? I mean, I don't know. From a lore perspective, it just doesn't make sense to me. And maybe that's going to be disappointing to some of you, but really, it just doesn't make sense. So, we can only hope for so much, right? We can only hope that it makes more sense. But yeah, that's why I'm not really going to be buying Primaris Space Marines, at least not unless I notice everyone using them, and then I realize I'm at a disadvantage, then sure, I'll get them. But, like, I don't know. I play Warhammer kind of for the fluff, for the lore, because it seems fun, and I don't know. I think I would just really rather enjoy, just playing with the regular old Space Marines, and just doing it that way. So that's why I just went with the Predator tank instead of instead of purchasing the Primaris Marines, or purchasing, the whatever the Primaris hovering tank is, and just, I don't know. I'm going to try it that way, and that's kind of my thoughts on the Primaris Space Marines. Yeah, they're cool. I think they probably add some interesting gameplay mechanics, but fluff-wise, I just could never see myself really using them, just because they're not really Blood Angels. I mean, they're Blood Angels with the, under that keyword, but they're not really Blood Angels, if that makes sense. Well, anyway, guys, I hope you all enjoyed this little sit down and talk sort of thing. Just had to kind of get my thoughts out. But as always, guys, I'm Elwirfy, and I'll see you guys next time.